Well, good morning, everybody. So glad to see so many of you here for the third installment of our little series on the history of racism in our own backyard. And we are so pleased to welcome this morning Chuck Williams from our neighbors at Scotland AME Zion Church in Potomac. And among many other things, Chuck is a lay minister and supporter of lay ministry with a strong belief that the mission of the church can only be completely fulfilled when the laity steps in to make a difference in the world. And we, of course, believe that really strongly here at St. John's too. And Chuck, we're just so glad to have you and to hear a little bit more from your own perspective about the history and the present and the future at Scotland AME Zion. And so I will, without further ado, turn things over to you. Welcome, Chuck. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Okay, I'm going to see if I have screen sharing. Okay, let's see if I am able to. Okay. Probably. Maybe you have. It's not. Just. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, good morning. Technology can be very interesting, okay? But I think we're all connected everywhere. I see that my wife is online here, so I'm going to say hello. You want to test, cutie sweetie, and say hello back? I'm sure she's muted and her camera is off. She does that all the time.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so since she has said that, and I was asked a question and I wanted to share that. Again, my name Chuck Williams. We moved here in 1992. We were living in Richmond at the time. Now, my wife has always been a member of the AME Zion Church. I was a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We sort of kept that part of the marriage separate until we got here. And, do I need to be muted here?
And I don't know where your mute button is. No, not that one. Actually, it's actually just turn the volume down on your computer.
Okay.
Where's the volume button on the computer? Turn it down. I don't know.
I'm sorry, bear with me. That should be it. Get back into the front window. Okay, we're back. All right, that gray bar at the top of the screen should go away shortly. We can make it. Let's go back a slide. Okay, all right, we'll get through that. Okay, so as I said, we moved to this area and my wife wanted to find an AME Zion Church. Her name is Kathy, by the way. You'll hear me call her cutie sweetie, but that's just something between us. And right now she's saying I'm going to kill him when he gets home. But we moved to this area, and since we were new to the area, she said, I want to find the church. I think I found one, but since I'm new and I don't know the way around, I need you to go with me so I don't get lost. So the two of us ventured out. We live up in Germantown, Maryland. We ventured out, got on 270, followed her directions. We came off of 270 at exit 4, went into Potomac, Maryland, and went down 7 Locks Road, and we pulled up at this building. I looked at the building. I looked at her. I looked back at the building, looked at her again and said, do you realize how many churches we passed just to come here? And she said, well, you know, I spoke to the pastor. He seemed very warm and friendly. I think I might like it here. So let's just go in and check it out. And so we did. And when we went inside, this is what we found. This was or is, I should say, a choir that the only comment that I can make is, man, this choir is rocking, you know? And that is what drew me to, yeah, let's attend services here. Let's see, you know, what else goes on here. So ultimately, we both became members of Scotland AME Zion Church. Now, whenever I get involved in church, I always look at it as something more than just a building. In fact, we are the church, okay? So what goes on inside of the building, to me, is more the definition of the church than the building itself. But having said that, we'll talk about the building a little later. As I got more and more involved, I started getting involved in some of the ministries, and we had one incident that took place. That incident was in 2005, and the then principal of Winston Churchill High School sent a letter home to parents. The reason for the letter? There were 2 boys that were fighting over a girl. Anybody go through anything like that when they were in school? Okay. So she did not say that, well, there were 2 boys fighting over a girl. What she chose to say was that you need not worry because it was a black on black violence situation. And that didn't go well with the community. So we're sitting at home watching the news, 11 o'clock news on television, and the news report, it talks about this event that took place at Winston Churchill High School. And when he talks about this black on black violence situation, I turned to my wife and I said, you think that's the kids from the church that we just joined? And lo and behold, yes, they were involved in this situation. Now, the other bad news to that is that the Montgomery County Police Department then jumped in and they decided, change that slide there, they decided that they were going to report, well, not only was it a black on black violence situation at the high school, but the kids there are members of a gang. And, you know, they've been monitoring this gang and the things that the gang has been doing. So now I'm like, okay, it sounds like we got quite a challenge here. That Sunday we came into church and the pastor said, well, there was a letter that went out from the principal and there were some racially sensitive remarks that she made. I think we need to go up into the community and heal the community and find out what can we do as a church. And we did that. We had a spaghetti dinner at the community center up there. We invited the entire community and the pastor stood up and he said, how can we help? And we started hearing a lot of different things. So I went over to some of the young men and I said, what can we do? And they said, we'd like to participate in the Montgomery County Recreation Basketball League. Okay, sounds simple enough. I called to find out, what's this going to take? Well, you know, you fill out the forms. There is an entry fee. That's like several $100s. And the kids must wear uniforms. So then I had to research, okay, how much is it going to cost in order to get uniforms for them? All said and done, the whole thing, the registration, the uniforms, all of that we're looking at roughly $1,500. Okay. And I said, okay, I opened my mouth. Now, where am I going to get $1,500 to take care of all this? And our men's ministry stepped up and said, we'll do it. And so we got these kids registered in this basketball league. I did not realize the basketball league was more or less a tune-up league for all of the high school basketball teams in Montgomery County. And we come in with a bunch of kids who play pickup basketball. I don't have to tell you what the result of that was, okay? But they didn't win a lot of games. They did find a couple of games that they were able to win. And they had a pretty good showing against some of the other teams. As a matter of fact, if I were to say, one of those young men who was a pretty good player decided, hey, you know, we had a pretty good standing against these guys. I'm going to try out for the high school basketball team. And he did, and he made the team. And then there was a private school that saw him, and they recruited him from that team to come out to their school. Right now, he is in California. He works in the film industry in Los Angeles. So to me, it seems like, okay, well, maybe that basketball thing kind of worked out. But then we had another problem. I get a call from the director one day, and he says, I just had an undercover Montgomery County police officer leave my office. And he tells me that your team and the supporters, the parents who are in the stands watching the games, are wearing gang colors. I said, well, listen, let me speak to this person because they're not a gang, and these are the colors that they selected. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but when I grew up, we had neighborhood teams. We played football, basketball, baseball, and I grew up in the inner city, so it was one block versus another block. It was fun. Okay? It was what we can do to pass time away without getting in trouble. We were setting these kids up to do the same thing. Okay? That didn't work out. So I told them that I would check into it. And I did. I contacted the Montgomery County Police, set up a meeting with them. We went up and we spoke. They suggested that I get involved with the police chief's weekly meetings, monthly meetings, I should say, and I did that. Okay. And during that time, I said to these kids, say, I'm going up to meet with the chief of police. Is there anything going on here that I should know about that I should mention to him? And they said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, how do we get off the list? I say, what list? He says, I don't know. Every time we try to go to a football game, they tell us that we're not allowed in because our names are on a list. I said, well, tell me more about this list. He said, we don't know about the list. They just tell us our name's on the list and we're not allowed in the game. So I raised this with the police chief. There was a gentleman there from the NAACP who then arranged for me to have a meeting with the Montgomery County Public Schools Board. And I did. I raised it with them. They went back to Winston Churchill to find out about this list. My question was, is that, tell me, what does one do when they find their names on this list? And most importantly, how do they get off of the list? Well, it just so happens I was talking trash with them. My son played football for Northwest. We live up in Germantown, as I mentioned. And I told them how Northwest is going to come down to Churchill and just whip the pants off of that school and their football team, which is how they told me their name was on a list. Well, the game came up. I'm at the game, and all of a sudden, those same young men I see walking in. I said, well, how did you get in? He said, oh, didn't you hear? It was on the news last night. The list has gone away. So just as mysterious as the list appeared, the list disappeared, okay? There were a number of other things that have gone on. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it just seemed that there was something wrong with the picture, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. So I realized that maybe this is God calling me to say, this is where I want you because there's work that needs to be done here. And I've been a member there ever since. Now, there are some things, as I mentioned, these are, you can't see the top there with the bar there, but at the bottom it shows Scotland in the headlines. These are some of the things that took place. One night at, well, early one morning at 3 a.m. in the morning, the police conducted a no-knock raid on several homes in the community. The reason? There was someone who lived in the community who apparently misspent some of their parents' money, and as kids will do, you blame someone else. So they said, oh yeah, those boys that are outside, they must have come in the house. Now, even with that, I thought it odd if you're investigating a robbery that you're going to do a no-knock raid. So here at 3 o'clock in the morning, there were several homes in the Scotland community where the police just kicked in the doors. They searched the homes. They didn't find anything. What they did find were, let's see, I think one young man said that he had a couple of bullets. He had no gun. He just had bullets. He thought was really cool to have. Okay. Well, the police listed that as gang-related material. The same thing with, they had, you know, bandanas that people wear, gang-related material. They brought them to court, and the district attorney looked at the evidence and threw out the case before even trying it. Nolle prosequi, I believe is the term that they use, which simply means, I'm not even going to try this case. Then the Scotland community tried to appeal to the county to say, someone needs to fix our doors. And they were denied. So again, I said, this is going to be a fight that I'm really going to have to dig my heels in, because this is not the way human beings are supposed to be treated. There were other instances. I'm not going to go through all of them. The good news is there were also some things that have happened through the course of the history of Scotland that we can all be proud of. One of those things, when Scotland community was first built, that was in 1880. They started buying land in Potomac, and they built homes. They built them themselves. Okay? The homes had no electricity. There was no plumbing. Fortunately, there was a creek nearby, and that's where they got their water supply. No electricity, so they had nothing as far as that's concerned. One of the residents told me at night, they had a nail that they bent and they put that across the door. And it wasn't because they were afraid of any crime. It's because that was the only way to keep the wind from blowing the door open. Okay. So they continued to live like this for some time. And then it reached a point where, as you can see from the homes there, it reached a point where the county wanted to do some expansion in Potomac, and they wanted to put up horse stables. And they decided that the Scotland community is the perfect place to do that. So the game plan was, let's condemn the property because they have no plumbing, they have no sewage, they have no water, there's no electricity. Well, the reason why they didn't have it is because during that period of time, that was during the Jim Crow era when they first got there, no one was going to do that for them, okay? And we had some good news. As you can see the picture with the three gentlemen there. At least one of them are from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And what they did was something that was not only unique to Scotland, but it was the first ever done in the nation. There was a situation where you had some landowners, you had some others that were landowners by way of being heirs, where property was passed down from generation to generation, but it was not enough that they can say that they had their own individual property. So what they did was they put together this package where it was a combination of homeowners and home renters, and it was the first ever in the nation. They use that model so that they can do the same thing in communities across the United States. The homes, not too soon on one, look something like this. This was in 1968 when they put this together. Right now, the homes in the rental section look like this. Okay? And that's because they've been upgraded. The homeowners section still has a challenge because they're trying to play catch up over there. There's a total of 100 units, 75 of the units are rental, 25 of the units are homeowners. So the homeowners have to get together in order to get something that looks like this. They have to get together and do it on their own. Okay, but there's a reason why this happened. And the reason was these two ladies. Okay. One is Joyce Siegel, and the other is Geneva Mason. Joyce is white. She's Jewish. Geneva, African-American. She's Christian. And obviously, as you can tell, she's Black. But the two of them got together. Joyce brought her children in, and my friend Paul back here can tell the story better than I can these days, but Joyce would bring her children into the community. And when she heard what the county's plan was, she was so incensed, she rallied all of the neighbors, all of the white neighbors in the surrounding community. They had a meeting at Scotland AME Zion Church. Geneva Mason showed up. They explained what they wanted to do, and they wanted to fight to keep the county from being able to take this land away from the folks of Scotland. They were successful. They marched down to the county building. There was a crowd of Black and white people standing down there saying, "You are not going to do this." There's a quote that says, "I think Jesus Christ himself was with us that day." Okay, but the county backed off. And then they decided that we needed to do some other things. And that's when they formed the Scotland Development Corporation, and they reached out to the federal government, and the federal government came in and they put this project together. Again, the first in the nation. For that, they started what we call the Save Our Scotland project. All right, this is part of their history. The result of everything they did actually got an award, because it was one of the times when we saw in this country, both Black and white, Jews, Christians, everyone come together to help save and to build this community. So they were able to get an award for that, and that's something that we should all be proud of because everyone participated. If we fast forward, that was in the 20th century. If we fast forward into the 21st century, we come across Scotland again, okay? And in this case, this is a picture of the Recreation Community Center, okay? It was pretty bad shape, and they had been trying for years to get the county to do something about it. It was so bad that I don't show it here, but there are pictures in the back where they actually had large puddles whenever it rained, right? On the inside, we had a group come in there, and there was one person who was from the Potomac community who looked over. They had a basketball court that was so narrow that they put up padding to keep the kids from running into the walls and damaging themselves, okay? She saw it and she said, "That is so cute. They have their own bowling alley here." We knew that something needed to be done, and we fought for that. This is what the Recreation Center looks like today. And the reason why that happened is, once again, both Black and white got together in a group called AME, Action in Montgomery. I don't know if you're familiar with it, okay? And at that time, there were 33 houses of worship that came together, and they more or less said, your struggle is our struggle. Your fight is our fight. And between those 33 churches, they were able to, churches and synagogues, I'm sorry, they were able to do something so that they could make that happen. The two people that were involved in that were Judy Walzer and Betty Thompson. It just so happened that Judy saw that there were people trying to dodge traffic at that intersection. And she said, hey, something has to be done about that. Judy was already a member of AME. She went to AME and she told them about it. And they said, well, we have to go into the community and see if that's what the community wants. They directed Judy to Betty Thompson. Betty at that time was known as the community's mother. Everybody came to Betty. In fact, when they had that issue with what the principal said, and we had the spaghetti dinner, right, the crowd was there and they were all up in arms. Betty sat there quietly, and then she slowly stood up to speak, and everyone in the room said, wait a minute, Miss Betty is getting ready to say something. So I said, okay, this woman must really have some juice here. I mean, the crowd quieted, and she simply quietly said, when you kids go to school tomorrow, I want you to walk in there with your shoulders back, your heads held high, and you just tell them that you are from Scotland. And she didn't scream it or anything, but she said it so quietly in a way that here I am, someone who grew up in New Jersey, and I'm saying to myself, yeah, I'm from Scotland, you know? So she had that effect on you, right? They put this together and we fought to get this community center. I won't go through all the details of that campaign, but I can tell you that it wasn't something that was on the county's list of things to do. We managed to get it on there, but again, it was when communities came together, when color did not matter to people, when race, income, status did not matter to people. They knew that this needed to be done and it was the right thing to do. And so we have those two examples of what can be done. Now in this picture, I guess that I know what that bar is, that's the control bar, and I don't know how to get it out there, but the thing that we normally do, whenever the subject of race comes up, we wind up either taking it personal, okay, if you're a white, pardon me for saying that, or sometimes we take it personal if we're Black, you know, and it becomes what you did and what you people did and all of that stuff. Instead of, let's just take the subject itself, put it on the table. Let's not point fingers. Let's not play the blame game. Let's simply look at it for what it is, and then we can discuss it. So I want to take a few minutes to kind of go through that because I understand that racial justice, racism is the topic that you all are studying this month. So in that, first thing I want to do is just give you a quick description of myself. Okay, I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, an industrial blue-collar town, okay? And I was born and I lived in the inner city. We called it the hood, okay? And for the first, I guess, 3 years of my education career, my parents put me in a private school. That school was predominantly white, so I learned to interact with people who did not necessarily look like me. When I went to the 3rd grade, then I started going to racially mixed schools. By the time I got to the 12th grade, my high school was predominantly Black. It was about 50-50 when I first came in the 9th grade. By the 12th grade, it was predominantly Black. Part of that is due to the fact that people were moving out of the inner cities and they were either going to the suburbs or they were moving to other communities in the cities with people who look like them, okay? I was recruited to a college, of all places, in Ashland, Wisconsin, right on Lake Superior. And it was a predominantly white college. When the recruiter came to town, what he told me was, you know, and my first name is Thomas, he says, Tom, I'm going to tell you, there's some really nice people there. But if you go up there looking for ham hocks, collard greens, and cornbread, you're not going to find it. Okay? I was cool with that. I could eat anything. What he didn't tell me at that time, you're not going to find Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen up there either. So what I was going to do for my hair, I don't know. I think that's the reason why it left me. But I stayed up there for a year, came back down to the college that was right in my hometown. Again, predominantly white. I started a career on Wall Street, again, predominantly white. And the difference was coming from a blue collar working class community and going up with high finance people who were very rich. That was something that I had to get used to also. I became a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and I worked with that congregation. Now, as I mentioned, the community was shifting, it was changing. People who look like most of you were moving out, they were moving to the suburbs, moving to other parts of the city. So the community surrounding the church was predominantly African-American. We had a young Swedish pastor who came in and said, you know, we have to do things to attract the people who are in our community. So one of the first things we have to do is change some of the music here. That didn't go over well with some of the long-term members. And in one case, there was a woman who'd been away for a while. When she returned and everyone said, oh, it's so good to see you. She said, well, to tell you the truth, I don't plan to come back here, and I'm going to say it, until they stop playing that nigger music. Okay. And I was shocked the first time I heard it also. Somehow I thought that we were all in the family of Christ and that race would not matter to us. Okay. But I started working with what the Lutheran Church called Mission 90, and that was their effort to increase the membership of people in the Lutheran Church who were African-American, who were Latino, who were Native American, who were Asian. They wanted it to look more like a global situation. So they started sending me around to different churches in different states to speak. So this is how I burnished all my credentials here. But this is not about me. So let's talk about some of the things that we do want to talk about, and that's this theme of racial justice. There's a couple of things that I want to touch on. The first is a narrative, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what that is. The second, of course, is prejudging or prejudice, okay? And the third is racism and discrimination. So I'm going to jump right in. On narrative, you know, we know what it says in the Bible about when we speak about things. What happens here is that we get people that start making descriptions, they start describing things, and people take that to heart. So you'll note in some of these passages, the first one says, when I was growing up in Potomac, that was where, and this was in the question of what is Scotland or where is Scotland? That is where the low-income families live. People used to call it the Potomac ghetto. And she said, you know, I won't say any more about that. Also, it says African Americans are more likely to be seen as suspects of horrendous crimes in the press, but are also interpreted as being violent or harmful. Okay, and everyone gets this picture of, you know, violent Black people. Okay, and in a lot of instances, that can be so far from the truth. Also, sometimes they use science. This is John Calhoun, who was Secretary of State back in 1844. Science is confirmation of proof of the necessity to keep slavery, because these people wouldn't know what to do with themselves if you freed them. They need us in order to guide them. This was his rationale for keeping slavery. And then, of course, recent, it says research suggests that when people see Asian Americans as being more foreign, they are more likely to express hostility towards them and engage in acts of violence and discrimination. And that was a professor who was speaking about former President Donald Trump referring to COVID-19 as the China virus. Okay. So when you get these narratives and you start painting these narratives of people, this is what a lot of people take in. And when they take that in, the thing that they start doing is prejudging you. All right. From the word prejudge comes prejudice. All right. So they develop a prejudice against you. And in this first instance here, we talk about police. And we've had a lot of cases where we've had police shoot unarmed people, right? In most of these cases, the police basically use as their defense a 5-word sentence: I feared for my life, right? And because we had this narrative of hostile, violent people, then it becomes, oh, well, that explains it. And in most cases, they get off scot-free. Okay. Now, again, going with something more recent, Senator from my first college state, Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, apparently spoke on January 6th, where he says that, no, these people were not here to hurt me. I know they love their country. Okay? But had it been the other way around, and he had enough insight to say, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but if Trump had won the election and the hundreds of thousands of people that were outside were Black Lives Matter or Antifa, well, then I would have been concerned. All right. So again, all of this building up from the narratives that are put out there, the prejudging or prejudice that people may have, and that leads to racism. My definition of racism is when you exercise power based on your prejudices. So if you think that Black people are violent, that they don't know how to take care of themselves, there's no way we should have taken them out of enslavement. And that's the way you look at things. That's the decisions that you make. And when you have power and you make those decisions based upon power, that becomes a problem. That's what we call racism. Now, what we look at for racism, did I hit this? Sorry. There's individual racism. There's also institutional racism, and there is cultural racism. So I'll kind of touch on these so that we can look at where this goes. There we are. Okay. So I think most of us would agree that when you look at things like the genocide that Hitler created or committed, when you look at hate crimes, when we look at the Ku Klux Klan, lynching, neo-Nazi groups, I think most of us would agree that that's your idea of a racist. Would that square with everyone? Okay. Yeah, the problem is this is only the tip of an iceberg, okay? And what we know about icebergs is that 1/10 of it shows above the water, 9/10 of it is going to be below the surface. So when we look at the iceberg, we start to see other things that can be done either individually or systematically or culturally that also fall under the category of racism. So some of the things that really got me, let's see, there's one in there about believing that a person should not run for president because they weren't born in this country, which is what they used to say about Barack Obama, when in fact he was born in Hawaii, and the last time I checked, it is one of the 50 states. Okay. The one that I sometimes have to chuckle at is at the very bottom. Don't blame me, I never owned slaves. Okay. And in this day and age, sure, that's true for all of us. In fact, I've never owned them either. Okay. But we have to look at, well, what were some of the effects of what has happened historically over time? Doesn't mean that anyone's being punished. It's just saying, well, how do we make whole so that we can be a country that we move forward and everyone's on the same page? So when we look at it, if you look at some of the effects and some of the things that you say or do, you see at the top again, people say mean things, microaggressions, racial insensitivity, as in the letter from the Churchill principle, mean graffiti, As a matter of fact, at Winston Churchill just last week, the principal of today had to send out a letter because someone put a racially sensitive joke on the bathroom wall, and they used the N-word in their joke also. So these things, they're still happening today. But if you look under the surface, you see a lot of things that are the impact of racism. So the question is, when you look at all of that, and when you turn around and say, well, why can't these people get their act together? Maybe it's because there's still a lot of things happening, even today, that we normally say, that's not right. So if you look at it, again, those three types, there's individual racism, personal, that is institutional, and cultural. If you look at why people of color are in the shape that they're in today, you know, a lot of it, believe it or not, does have to do with racism. Okay? If you could be in a situation, there is a woman by the name of Jane Elliott. She does surveys, she has exercises. She's famous for what they call the blue eyes, brown eyes exercise. She took a bunch of kids in a class in Iowa, and she said, you're going to wear the tag that says you have brown eyes. You're going to wear the tag that says you have blue eyes. And then she mistreated those kids who were the brown-eyed kids and gave all of these privileges to the kids who were the blue-eyed kids. The kids even had a fight during recess. And she said, what was the fight about? One kid said, because he called me brown eyes. Okay. So we see that when we get permission to treat people a certain way, things happen differently than what they should. If she were to take this, and one of the things that she did, and I think this was on Oprah, I believe, when Oprah was airing, and she asked a predominantly white audience, how many people would be willing to trade places with a Black person? And no one raised their hand. She said, I'm sorry, maybe you didn't understand me. How many people would be willing to trade places with a Black person? Raise your hand. No one raised their hand. And she said, that's just what I thought. You know about the treatment that are happening to people of color, and you won't do anything about it. So we talk about racism. How do you become an anti-racist? It's not enough to simply say, I'm not a racist. How do you become an anti-racist? Two gentlemen by the name of Schwerner and Goodman, back in the 60s, for voting rights, they sacrificed their lives because they wanted to be anti-racist. Okay? There was a woman, Viola Luiso. She came down from Michigan to the South during that period of time. She lost her life because she gave African Americans a trip to the county courthouse so they can register to vote. She was an anti-racist. When we know that things are not the way they should be, it's not enough to simply say, you know, hey, I'm not going to do that. We have to look at how we become anti-racist. How do we say that this is wrong? How do we do what they did in the Save Our Scotland campaign? How do we do what they did in the Scotland Community Centers campaign? We have to be more than people on the sidelines. Okay? So we know that the one who we follow, Jesus Christ, you know, he came down, and the things that he talked about was how we love one another. He was a game changer, okay? A change agent. This is one of the things that's being done in the Scotland community. There are 5 churches in our area on Seven Locks Road, and in those 5 churches, we have come together to say, let us do this together. Our first step, music. We got our choirs together and put together a concert. We have some discussion going. We're hoping that we can do that at Scotland with your choir and our choir. for starters. Starting next week, we're doing a Lenten series together, all 5 churches. And each year, we gradually make another step in the direction of coming together and working together. Again, Jesus was a change agent. We can be the change, and more importantly, collectively together, we can be the church. And if we follow Jesus Christ and we follow his example, we can do that and we can win. Thank you.
Chuck, thank you so much. That was just really wonderful and both from a history perspective and also really importantly, the framework you gave us for the way that narrative and story sort of moves into prejudice and then becomes racism and racist discrimination. It's just really helpful. Thank you so much. I think we have a few more minutes. I've lost video to the
Sarah, we're still here. I'm working on the video, so let's keep moving with questions from on your end.
Can
Right,
I, before we do that, I had a couple of slides I wanted to just talk about our upcoming campaign. Is that okay?
Yes.
Do we have time for that?
Yes, we
Okay,
do.
I've got some slides do I need to?
Sure.
Okay. You can do it right from, yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Okay, we're moving on. How about we stop sharing for a moment, we can come back in. So that's okay, looks like the slides are not going to let me go through with that. I'll just quickly talk about it. So everyone may be familiar with what happened to Scotland back in July of 2019. The way Scotland is designed, the way it's built, it sits in what amounts to a soup bowl. Because on one side, there are homes up on a hill. And the developer of those homes designed their wastewater or their stormwater management system so it would flow down that hill. On the other side of it, there is Seven Locks Road. And Seven Locks Road historically came behind the church. The county decided that they wanted to straighten Seven Locks Road out, so they moved it to the opposite side on church property, and the road goes through church property. But what they also did was they elevated the road about 2 feet above the property. So it sits sort of like in a soup bowl. Anytime that we have storms, all of that water just collects there. In July of 2019, we had a very bad storm. So all of this water came through, it filled the basement. Now, normally we have a sump pump in the basement, and the purpose of the sump pump is to get the water out when those things happen. But this time, it was so much water, it was so overpowering that the sump pump did not work. Water practically touched the ceiling of the basement. It was that high. And when we came in to take a look at the church to see if there was any damage that was done before service, we found that it took one of the walls out. So instead of having 4 walls holding the building up, there were only 3. So we were concerned that that would be a safety issue. We have not been back inside the building since 2019. All right. We are now in the process of restoring the building. Oh, thank you. We do have it up. Okay. So there's a three-step or three-phase process that we have. The first phase is what we call the restoration phase. And in the restoration phase, we're going to try to put the historic building back together again the way it was. We want to make it a little bit more fortified, but nevertheless, we want to restore the building. The second phase, as I described, what's happening is that it has that soup bowl effect. We want to take that away. So there's things that we're looking at doing so that we can redirect water to go into a nearby stream, but at the same time, elevate the building 4 feet from where it is so that it will be 2 feet above Seven Locks Road. And this way, any stormwater that comes will be able to just drain off into the stormwater system that is part of Seven Locks Road. Right? The third phase, we want to be able to get back to doing ministry. Right now, we are able to worship somewhere else, but we have no place where we can do ministry, Sunday school, things of that sort. So we want to be able to do that. So the third phase is to construct the new state-of-the-art building. And we do that right behind the historic building. And we'll have that so that we can do things that churches should be doing. It's a lot more than just simply coming to worship on Sunday. So the project will look something to this effect. There we go. So as you can see, where it says multi-purpose space, that is the original building, right? We're going to design that so that when the new building is put up, we'll move the sanctuary over there. The historic building will become multi-purpose. We'll be able to have community meetings and things of that sort there, okay? The new construction will be about 3 times the size of the original building, right? So that means that the whole project will make it 4 times the size of the original building. Okay. The other that we want to do is let's look at, well, what's it going to cost us in order to do this? And when we look at the restoration phase, the regeneration phase, the rejuvenation phase, that comes to an estimate total of about $9 million. So we have a campaign going on right now to raise $9 million. There are ways that you can help with the campaign. Okay. One of the ways, as we talked about, is a joint concert with the 2 choirs. We can use that as a fundraiser. We'd love to be able to do that. So we're in talks to be able to get something like that done. Anyone who wants to make individual donations, we won't stop you. We'll be glad to accept that also. So we're looking at many different ways that we can do this. Here's, I did a copy of what Paul has here, okay? Because I didn't know if Paul was going to bring this or not. But this is what it looks like. This one is probably better to look like. So here's the original building. You'll see the new construction behind it. Now, obviously, what does not show here is how this whole thing will be elevated so that stormwater will drain off as opposed to coming in. Okay? And what Paul is showing you there is something that you had designed. We also use this. In this picture, you'll see that we are holding this. We were at Adventist Healthcare, and they made a donation towards our campaign, $100,000. It was okay for me to say that. Why did you ask after, Chuck? But $100,000. And this is where you start to see everybody is involved in this. You see Councilman Andrew Friedson in the center, right along next to our pastor, the Reverend Dr. Evelina Huggins. The 2 gentlemen standing on either side of them are executives from Adventist Healthcare. Okay. They also pledged to make a second $100,000 gift to the campaign as well. On the ends, the woman standing just opposite me on the end, that is Janet Ross. I told you about Betty Thompson. That's her mother. And Betty is no longer with us. Janet has stepped in, and while she's not the speaker that her mother was, she does take care of the administrator. She is our church's administrator. She is also, she served, I should say, because things have changed around, as the deputy director for the Board of Elections, for Montgomery County Board of Elections. So she has been very instrumental in helping us and keeping everything on track. But this demonstrates that we could all come together to work on this. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. And I pray that we look at this as they did with AIM, where they said, your struggle is my struggle, your fight is my fight. And I think that's all I have. Paul, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
I would just say that, hey, so that everyone online can hear you.
And good morning, and thank you for having us here today. Very quickly, we have something called the Scotland Juneteenth Heritage Festival that will be held on June 19th in the Cabin John area at Cabin John Village Mall and also the Cabin John Regional Park. All of that land for most of the land for the park and all of the land for the shopping center used to be part of the Scotland neighborhood back in the day before urban renewal. So that'll be a very festive day. And there's lots of ways. There's 16 different committees. Ann knows all about this, has all the information. And so we'd love to have folks in the church involved in that as well. And Mark Edwards, who was here earlier, is on the history committee. He does amazing work on the history committee. And really the goal of the festival is to elevate, support, and celebrate all of the Black kinship communities in Montgomery County. There used to be more than 40. Most of them are gone now, but we're trying to draw attention and invite everybody in to participate. Ann, do you want to say something?
I'm glad that you mentioned that Mark Edwards volunteered to help co-chair the preparations for the History Pavilion that will be held at the Juneteenth Festival on behalf of St. John's. So anyone interested in getting involved with that exciting work, we can be in touch with Mark, and shortly there'll be organizational meetings and discussions, but it's an exciting way to contribute to this effort. Thank you. And Chuck, I understand you're going to worship with us?
Yes, I am.
10:30? Okay.
Yes,
so
I
you'll
am.
be here for the next half an hour.
Yes.
Some of us have to go get ready for the service.
Understood.
But anyone who wants to stay and talk to you.
Okay. And I do apologize, as my wife will tell you, I tend to go on and on and on and on. So if I did that this morning, let me apologize now. But I hope that the information I shared was helpful.
Chuck, thank you so much. This has been such a fantastic and informative presentation. You know, we know that we have to, be educated on the realities of things before we can step in to be the change that we're called to be as a church. So thank you so much for the education that you've given us and the time that you shared with us this morning. We unfortunately don't have time on Zoom to do Q&A because we need to get let these folks get have a chance to get to our worship service. I'm so glad that you'll be joining us, and hopefully some folks in the parish hall, if you're there, you have a chance to stick around and ask some of your own questions. But Chuck, thank you so much for being here, for your generosity with your time and your talent and your expertise. We really appreciate it.